Hello Douglas, you are working on a lot of great BBC series including Jekyll, Doctor Who, Sherlock, The Abominable Bride, Outlander. Please can you tell us a little bit about what it was like working on this great series for you?
On these great series?
Yes, of course.
I think one of the things that I love about working on shows like this is that they're all kind of interconnected in a funny sort of way, and the connecting factor is Doctor Who usually. Even Sherlock and Outlander. Outlander is a time travel story that's based on a Doctor Who idea of time travel. So I think it's science fiction is the connection, and the reason I love doing science fiction is because I love science fiction.
Great. What was it like to having directing a show which won an Emmy? Sherlock the Abominable Bride won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Television Movie.
Directing a show that eventually wins a Primetime Emmy Award doesn't feel like that because you don't know it's going to win it. So all you can do as a director is do your very best, and that's what I did.
You directed all the episodes of Good Omens. Were you familiar with the original source material before you started working on the series? The book Good Omens, the nice and accurate prophecies of Agnes, which is by Terry Pratchett Neil Gaiman.
I didn't know the book before I started working on it, so the first thing I read was scripts, and I loved the scripts so much. But by the time I started production, I knew the book really well, and I carried the book with me every day of the filming, because I felt like that was the source material, and we wanted to be faithful to that source material. So I had a copy of the book in front of me on the desk, and the other thing is that sadly Terry Pratchett died before I could meet him and before we started filming. So it felt like, with the book there, it felt like Terry was present as well as Neil Gaiman.
Can you talk about the collaboration on the series between yourself, Neil Gaiman, and composer David Arnold?
So with Neil Gaiman was the writer of the book, co-writer of the book with Terry Pratchett. He also wrote all the scripts, and we had a very close collaboration for nearly 2 years. He was there almost all the time, and we worked together on every single shot, every bit of sound, every casting decision, every prop, everything else. So it was a very close relationship, because what you're trying to do when you work with somebody like that, and I'd not worked with Neil before, is you're trying to find a vocabulary for the show, and that's what we try to do. And David Arnold, the composer, came in, and David is an amazing composer who's composed for James Bond, and also I worked with him on Sherlock. Yeah. So he felt like a great choice for us, and he just joined in with the vocabulary. And it's kind of, if I could define the vocabulary, it is, we used to play 2 tracks of music to our HODs, both by David Bowie. Yeah. And one was Life on Mars, and we said the piano solo by Rick Wakeman is amazing on this, and it's the most beautiful piano solo in all of pop music history.
Yes.
But that is not Good Omens. Then we played them Aladdin Sane, and Mike Garson plays an avant-garde jazz piano that shouldn't really work, and yet does work on Aladdin Sane, and we say that's Good Omens.
Great. What can you tell us about your work with David Tennant and Michael Sheen of this series? Which scene were the most difficult for you to direct? And what kind of communication have you with the crew?
With the crew?
Yeah, crew, yeah.
So I hope to run a set that is very convivial and happy, but where serious work happens. And I think David Tennant and Michael Sheen, I've worked with David before on Doctor Who. I hadn't met or worked with Michael Sheen before, but they're both consummate professionals, so it was a joy to work with them. It was like having 2 Stradivariuses in my hands just to play, and all I had to do was not mess up, you know. And what I think with actors, what you do is, as a director, is you try and clear a path so they can do their work, and that's what I try and do on set every day, is just try and make it so that they can work and do the magic thing that they do. And that's what I feel like working with the crew is, that we're clearing a path not only for the actors but for great shots to happen. But the primary thing that you always go back to is our purpose is to tell a story. So that's the only thing that's interesting. So if people are having tantrums or fed up or sad or it's raining or it's sunny, the only interesting thing is can we finish the day having told a bit of story for the audience?
Did other sources besides the books provide any inspiration for you to work on this series?
There were lots of sources, and I think when you see the series, I think one of the things that you'll see is that there is a family tree of British and particularly English humour that travels from P.G. Wodehouse all the way through Monty Python
Of course.
and Douglas Adams and so on, all the way to us. And we were very happy to see the other day that Eric Idle of Monty Python gave us a big compliment on Twitter, said that he loved the series. And Terry Gilliam was at the screening in London the other night, the premiere, and he loved it as well. And I was really honoured that they recognised the same chain. But other connections that might not be so obvious that Neil and I share is with Powell and Pressburger. Again, very English type of sensibility and vision. And as you can hear, I'm Scottish, so I'm using the word English very carefully.
Great. You have said that one of your favorite moments of your career was working on Sherlock episode, one of my favorite series. Can you tell us an anecdote about this experience?
About working on Sherlock?
Yeah.
What would be a good one for that? One of the things of working on Sherlock, so when we made it, it was at its peak of popularity. So filming in London, in where we had our Baker Street set, it was the same one, although I was doing the Victorian version, it was the same one as the contemporary version. So the fans discover that we're filming and follow us. So it's the only time in my career we had 5,000 fans watching us film.
Wow.
And they were screaming every time that Benedict or Martin Freeman came out. So Benedict said, "Can I help?" And I said, "How can you help? You know, you can't stop them." He said, "I can." And he went on Twitter and said, "Can you stop screaming between action and cut?" And we turned over and action was called, complete silence.
Wow.
And then cut. Hooray!
Whew. What were your visual references for the special effect on Good Omen?
Okay. The CGI that we did in Good Omens, there is kind of there's two attitudes I took for it. Number one, the CGI that is to do with Crowley and Aziraphale, the angel and the demon, was to do with it being casual and throwaway, like it's nothing, because they're angels and demons, so miracles are nothing. So we made it kind of messy and ordinary, like it just happens every day to them. But later in the series, when Adam, who's the young Antichrist, comes into his own, he starts magically making flying saucers and a kraken and all sorts of other things happen. And what we wanted was to have CGI that looked like it was from the head of a 12-year-old. So it's much more comic book and, you know, much more exaggerated. In fact, the flying saucer that we have was from a design of when my daughter was 12, she made a flying saucer model for me for Christmas, and we used that as a model. So the attitude was very much not to do slick American-style Guardians of the Galaxy CGI. We can do that, you know, it's okay. So it's time to change the vocabulary a little bit with CGI and just make it part of the storytelling technique.
Do you work generally with storyboards? What do you consider to be a good storyboarder?
I work with one particular storyboard artist called Mike Collins.
Okay.
And Mike has worked with me on Sherlock and in Doctor Who and other projects for years. And he's a great artist in his own right. But he gets inside my head and sees my eyes, sees through, and so I work with him all the time. And part of the reason you might use a storyboard is just to help explain a sequence to somebody. But you also use it as a way of focusing in for yourself on what you might do with a scene or a sequence. So it works in two ways. It forces you to think and explain, but then it also lets other people in, and it also makes the money feel comfortable.
Yeah, of course. Do you have a preference between full shooting in a studio or outside, and why?
I don't have any preference about where I shoot. The only interesting thing to me is gathering shots. and that's the only interesting thing. I don't care about elements or anything else. It's just gathering material. What I do worry about is what's happening to the actors when you're gathering shots. So in Good Omens, we have lots of car travelling interiors. So we did them all back projection, and we had an amazing back projection specialist who did that with us, and I loved it. I really hate being on low loaders with cars in the middle of the night in the rain. I just don't like it, because you can't talk to the actors. So I think there's lots of reasons why you shoot in different ways, but for me it's just gathering material, gathering shots.
What do you feel for you as a main case in creating a good series as Good Omens?
I think there is only one thing that
Which one?
that is interesting in any series or any film for me, and that is the story.
Yeah, of course. What films or television shows do you like actually?
I like all the shows I work on,
Of course.
which some people don't, you know. But I actually do love Sherlock, and I love Doctor Who. I always watch Doctor Who. But recently, the shows that I've loved are shows like Russian Doll and Succession. I think those are amazing shows, and I think it would be a treat to work at. But the show that had most influence on Good Omens, I think, of all, was Legion.
Okay. What practical advice would you give to someone who would like to become a director?
The first thing you have to do if you want to become a director is announce that you're a director.
Yes.
And then the next thing you have to do is make a film. And then the next thing you have to do is show it to people.
Well,
And people miss out the beginning bit and the end bit sometimes,
yes.
and to start directing. I think if you don't show what you've made to people, then you'll never learn what works with people and what doesn't.
And my last question, are there some French actors that you would like to work with?
I'm not sure I'm competent to answer that question.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you so much.